Hello, everyone, and welcome to the NFC North Division preview for the upcoming 2024-25 NFL season. I'm Alex, and I'll walk you through the division and see what's going to transpire in the upcoming season. Now, this is a division that is going to be really tough this season. 2 playoff teams last season, 2 teams in the division that won playoff games, and arguably we were really close to seeing an NFC North NFC Championship last season. Will we see that this year? I have no idea. It's kind of hard to tell at this point in the season, where the season hasn't even started. But I think that there is a new dog in the ring to see if they challenge the division title. I don't know if they actually compete for it. I think we got another playoff contender in this division this year. It's going to be interesting. This is a tough division, probably the toughest division in the NFC. I can't wait to go ahead and break it down for you guys. Without further ado, let's get started. We're going to start with the upstart Chicago Bears. The talk of the division should be interesting with a rookie quarterback, a bunch of new pieces. Here's a breakdown of the roster. I'm really interested to look at Caleb Williams and see what he does in his first year as a starter in the NFL. Did a lot of great things in college. Now, that doesn't always translate into the NFL. Just look at the draft class of 2021 and 2018. There are a lot of examples in the past decade of quarterbacks that get drafted in the first round, not only drafted in the first round, but high in the first round, that don't pan out. So, of course, this has got to be the one that hits for Chicago. And, I mean, you talk about that city. That city needs Caleb Williams to hit. Oh, my gosh. They got him some pieces, DeAndre Swift, Keenan Allen, and they drafted Rome Odunze. I think that offense is much improved from last season, and they didn't have to improve the defense that much because the defense played very well at the tail end of the 2023 season. I think that this is a good defense, and just another year for a lot of these starters is going to help their progression and getting better. Moving on to their schedule. I think it's a tough schedule. Actually, not. Tough back half of the schedule. It's a pretty easy schedule up front. They do get the benefit of playing a fourth-placed division schedule, so they draw the Commanders, the Cardinals, and the Patriots, and not teams like the Jets or the Seahawks or the Giants were the other team. That was it. It's a little bit tougher, but for them, it's going to be nice that they get to play some of those teams as well. I think that they have a bit of a good start to start the year. They have a couple, slip-ups. That Houston game early is tough. That LA game's tough at home. Maybe they slip up in London against Jacksonville. But I think they have a nice win streak by the end of the first half. And they go in to Soldier Field in their first divisional game in Week 11, by the way, which I think is just ridiculous, against Green Bay. And I think they're going to be able to get their first win against Green Bay in 6 years. Now, that's a bit of that's a take. That's a take, but as you can see, I think that they finished 10-7. I think with the team they had last year winning 7 games, and with the improvements that they made on the roster, there's no way that they can't improve by 3 games. Of course, there are things that happen. Maybe Williams get injured. Maybe he doesn't live up to the expectations that people are holding him to. But on paper, the team is better, and with the schedule that they have, it really shouldn't be that hard to win 3 more games than they did last year. That being said, I think they win 10 games. Their ceiling is probably about 12 games. I think that it with the way that I have the schedule printed out, they could easily get that win against Minnesota and win against that win against Jacksonville to get to 12 wins. But I think that, if things don't work out at all, they lose that game to Green Bay, they lose that game to Detroit that have them winning. They lose to Indianapolis. Maybe they lose a game to Seattle. I think that if something truly terrible happens, like Williams gets injured and they got to play Bagent, or Montez Sweat gets hurt, or just the team as a whole just doesn't perform, I think 6-11 is the floor. There's no way that the team wins less than 6 games, which would be, an absolute colossal failure for this franchise, especially winning 7 games last year with a supposed inferior quarterback and inferior offense altogether. Anything less than 7 wins is a total flop for this Bears team. Moving on to the talk of the NFL in this offseason, the trendy pick to go far in a deep playoff run, the Green Bay Packers. They had a great second half to last season. And of course, this is now the year that they're trying to make a push, not just for the NFC Championship game this year, but for the Super Bowl. So, look at the roster. You got Jordan Love, who had a very rough start to 2023, I'm not going to lie. But he picked up the pace in the back half of the season, led the team to a playoff win as a 7 seed, the first ever to do so, and came really close to making it to the NFC Championship game. And not only knocking off the number 2 seed in the conference, but then going on the road and being the number 1 seed the very next week. So I think that there's a lot of expectation in Green Bay this year. Of course, they added Josh Jacobs in exchange for Aaron Jones. Their receiving core, as Matt LaFleur likes to describe it, doesn't have a number 1 wide receiver. You got Watson, Dobbs, and Reed that are all reliable options. Luke Musgrave as the tight end. And I think that defense takes a huge boost from gaining Xavier McKinney from New York in the offseason. So I think that they've got a good roster on paper to go far in the postseason. Moving on to their schedule, I think that they're at a good position. I don't know if they improve on their record from last season that much, given some of the opponents that they play. But I still think they improve. I think my prediction is 11-6. I think that their ceiling is probably winning one more of these games, most likely that game against Chicago. But I think the floor, if Jordan Love plays more like the first half of the season as opposed to the second half of the season, they could possibly lose that second game to Detroit. They could lose that game to Indianapolis. They could lose a game to Miami. They could lose a couple of these games here that they should win on paper. And I think that they're going to be fine. I don't think that there will be I don't think it's going to be a total free fall. But, if you're a Packers fan and if you're following the Packers, you're hoping that Jordan Love plays more like the second half of last season and carries that momentum into the upcoming season than as opposed to the front half of 2023. And especially considering the extension that he just signed in the offseason. So I think that there is a lot riding on this Packers team, not necessarily to win the Super Bowl this year, but to perform and probably get to the NFC Championship game this year. So I think that there's a lot of pressure to do better than they did last year. Maybe get a home playoff game by winning the division. But of course, we'll see if that holds up here shortly. But yeah, I have the Packers at 11-6. I think that there's a little bit of they might slip up, but I think that the schedule at the end of the year is very favorable for them to shoot themselves into the postseason. Next up, we have the Minnesota Vikings, a team that is very interesting to talk about considering the fact that they have had a lot of turnover, getting rid of Kirk Cousins and drafting J.J. McCarthy 10th overall, trading up to get him. Talk about him in a minute. Losing Danielle Hunter, who had 16.5 sacks for the defense and was the entire reason they were in plenty of games last season defensively. And I think that while they still have a good receiving core, of course, there's a lot of question marks with this Vikings team. As we get in to take a look at the roster here, they're led by Sam Darnold because J.J. McCarthy went down with an injury after his great preseason performance against the Raiders week 1. Very promising. But unfortunately, he's out for the season. They're going to have to rock with Sam Darnold. They got Aaron Jones from Green Bay. Good pickup. Going to be interesting to see how he does in a different system in the division. See if he can get revenge on the Packers a little bit. That receiving core is still really good. They still have the best receiver in the division, arguably the best receiver in all of football, in Jordan Jefferson. I have Jordan Addison on here. We'll still see how his status is going into the season. We're not sure exactly how things are going. And I like their tight end in TJ Hawkinson, another pickup from an interdivision trade with Detroit. But their defense is where I start to get a little nervous. Stephon Gilmore was a big pickup here in August. Andrew Van Ginkel is probably their biggest defensive playmaker right now, but losing Danielle Hunter on the defensive line is really going to hurt. And I don't know if I trust the defense a ton. Harrison Smith, of course, in the backfield, but, he's only one guy, and he's been there for forever, but he's still playing and putting up good numbers. But it's that D-line that really concerns me. And, of course, while the offense has the playmakers, Sam Darnold is the quarterback, but I think that with the skill positions that they have, it could elevate his performance a little bit. That being said, with the division that they're in, I don't see this season going out very well for the Vikings, especially after J.J. McCarthy got hurt. Even with Sam Darnold being named the Week 1 starter, I didn't think that it was going to be for the whole season. But I don't think that they're going to have a good start. I think that they've got a tough slate to start. I think that New York game, Week 1, is a bit of a trap game. I feel like they very well easily could win that game, but I think the next 4 games are going to be tough. But I do think they get that win against Detroit. I feel like there's 1 division game, 2 division games that they're going to find a way to win. Which, another side note, speaking to the division games, the only head-to-head series that I think is going to be a sweep in this division this season is Green Bay beating Minnesota twice. Otherwise, everything else is going to be a split, in my opinion. But I have them at 6-11. It's not great. I don't think they can go much lower than this. I think that their floor is probably about 5 wins. But I think if everything goes right and their skill position players really help Sam Darnold be competent and their defense can step up, I think that they could possibly get to a winning record. Maybe win that game against Indianapolis, win against Seattle. They got a couple games there, beat New York, of course. But there's some things going on in New York, in Minnesota, that it really does feel like a doom and gloom season, with the injuries that have piled up and the questionable nature of a lot of players' status going into the season. So it's not necessarily a total throwaway season, but a lot of people in Minnesota are acting as if it is a throwaway season. I personally will also think that it is. Moving on to our last team, the Detroit Lions, the reigning division champs. The first time in 30 years they can say that. They're reigning division champs. I think this is going to be really interesting. The Lions are coming off of Cloud 9. They are on Cloud 9 right now after being in the basement of the league for years and years and years. They finally emerge as the hot, trendy team last season, and they play well, win their first division title in 30 years, playing their first home playoff game in pretty much the same amount of time, and win against the former quarterback that left for LA and won a Super Bowl. They beat him in the postseason, draw Tampa Bay. Pretty lucky draw if you ask me. They don't have to go on the road and play Dallas. They get a second home playoff game against Tampa Bay, and they win. And they get a great start against San Francisco in the NFC Championship game. I think that they have Super Bowl aspirations this season. Taking a look at their roster, little has changed. The departure of Josh Reynolds, the only notable thing on the offensive side of the ball. David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, still the best running back tandem in the division. They still have a good receiving core. I would like to see Jameson Williams step up. He had a couple big plays last season. He's had a couple big plays throughout his career, but he's been plagued by some injuries and just ineffectiveness. He's been a deep threat every couple games, but I would like to see him be more involved in the receiving game this season, and that I think is a very key part to seeing if this Lions offense can succeed. Having a good second reliable option outside of Amon-Ra St. Brown. Of course, the defense is led by Aiden Hutchinson, and they really reworked the secondary. And that's the big thing that they've been working on through the offseason. And I think that that's going to be really interesting to see how this defense plays, see if they can help the Lions win a couple games. And frankly, I think that's what's going to happen. I really like this Lions team. They didn't really need to change that much. They were able to keep everyone around. I think 13-4. It's really insane. I think they win a lot of tough games this year. I think they lose that NFC Championship rematch. But weirdly enough, that's the only non-division game I think they lose. I think they split with the 3 divisional opponents and lose against San Francisco. But, I don't think maybe they get that win against Minnesota and sweep them and pick up 14 wins. But outside of that, they could lose a couple more. They very well could lose a couple more games than what I have here. They could lose, that game to Buffalo. They could lose to Houston. They could lose to Green Bay again. They could lose to, a sneaky Dallas or Indianapolis or Jacksonville team, or lose that game to LA. They got a couple games in there. I think they're going to win. It's going to be interesting to see how they play, especially week 1 is going to be a good gauge. So I think that they're still going to be able to get a winning record regardless. I think that's their floor this season. But, obviously, with a 13-4 record, it's hard to beat that. So these are my division standings. I think that the Lions will end up winning the division with a 13-4 record and nab the number 2 seed. And the number 2 seed because they lose to San Francisco in Week 17. I think Green Bay follows up suit with 11-6 record, picks up the number 6 seed in the conference, and I think Chicago is going to make the postseason with 10 wins, be that 7 seed. We'll get to see an NFC North division showdown between the Lions and Bears in the wild card round. That would be pretty fun. But the Vikings then fall down to 6-11. And I think that the reason why the Vikings, I have them at 6-11, is because of the tough division that they're playing in. If they were playing in the NFC South, or if they're playing in a different division, I feel like they have a better shot at winning a couple more games, maybe even having a winning record. So, the NFC North, tough division. Toughest division in the NFC this year, I'd say. Who do you think comes out on top in this division? Does Detroit repeat as division champs? Does Green Bay steal back momentum and become kings of the North again? Or does a sneaky team like Chicago come up out of the basement and go from worst to first? Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. Who's the MVP of the division this year? Who has the best season? Do any of these teams make the Super Bowl? Do we have an NFC North NFC Championship game? There's a lot to talk about with this division. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Please like this video if you like this preview. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of these types of videos. And I will see you guys in the next one. Take care.